Alright guys, Puppy's World here once again, and today we've got automotive needs. Alright, I've got my 2001 Acura CL Type S here, and this video is called Changing Your Own Brakes. This is concerning changing disc brakes, as the front and rear of this vehicle are disc brakes. I will do multiple other videos showing builds and whatnot, showing tools, but for the required job, make sure you have socket wrench or impact driver, Phillips screwdriver, 17 and 14 millimeter sockets, which I have over here, and make sure if you're using impact wrenches, impact gun, or ratchet, you use impact sockets. Okay guys, I'm going to get to the vehicle rail quickly, as I've got it jacked up off the floor using several tools. I am using an aluminum Craftsman jack. Keep in mind, I have oiled my Ingersoll Rand impact gun with air oil prior to use. I am not using an impact socket on it, which is a no-no, as the impact socket itself, the 14 millimeter, was too difficult to get behind to the caliper bracket. Now, in order to do such work, I'm kind of doing this backwards. However, we started with the wheel on the car, not that one, that one, and the rotor and the pads. Now these pads aren't worn out that badly, however they squeak like hell, so it was time to replace. One thing to keep in mind, when you replace brake pads on discs, it is recommended that you replace the rotor when doing so. One cheap way to keep costs down and things effective is to specifically take a pair of rotors that you feel have not been used very much or still have some life on them, take them to your local auto parts store and have them turn them on the lathe for about $10 or $15 a piece. It saves you a ton of money. So, as opposed to using our EBC cross-drilled and dimpled rotors, which make a ton of noise while going down the road, we're going to be going with an OEM Brembo, used though, however, used previously by myself, but for about, 10,000 miles maximum. Brought him to the auto parts store, had him turned on the lathe, no problem whatsoever. So, first order of operations is to take an impact gun or a large breaker bar, so to speak, or a half-inch socket, and remove your lug nuts. We have gone and done that, as you can see. Once you remove the lug nuts, you would take the wheel off after jacking up the car, of course. I recommend loosening all lug nuts prior to jacking up the vehicle. And keep in mind, for this video purpose, I do not have a jack stand underneath the towing mount of the vehicle, which is always recommended. You can either use something like this. This is an old classic Sears jack stand I've had since maybe about the 60s. It's ran in the family. And I've got a newer style Craftsman here, which I've augmented with some tape so that it won't scratch the toe hooks or jack points on the vehicle. You're going to want to use, keep in mind, most street vehicles are about 4,000 pounds, so 1 ton is 2,000 pounds. Keep in mind 3 tons would be 6,000 pounds. Also keep in mind that you're only jacking up half the vehicle, so if you've got a 4,000 pound vehicle here, we're talking about 2,000 pounds lifted up the front end, maybe 3 at the most. This vehicle weighs 3,700 pounds with 5 people in it, the engine full with gas and full of oil. However, 3,200 pounds with no one in it, gross tongue weight. So, no problem jacking it up. However, it can be just fine on a 2-ton capacity aluminum racing jack, no problem. I wouldn't trust my life underneath the car, but we'll go on. Okay guys, after removing your wheel, you're going to want to take a look at your rotors and your pads. First thing you're going to want to do is remove your caliper bolts. Not caliper brackets, 2 different things. Caliper bolts are these 2 things right here. They actually hold the caliper, and I'll show you in another video on the other side of the wheel, the other hub, so to speak, how that looks when I'm placed on the vehicle. Okay, sorry about the garage, guys, as it was a time to close feature. I have to change on the garage at some point. It's set to close at 5 minutes all the time. Okay, alright, once we've removed our caliper bolts, in this case on an Acura or most Hondas from about 98 to 2007, they are going to be 14 millimeter caliper bolts. As you can see here. Don't kick your bolts around on the floor like I have mine too. Use a creeper or a fender cover if you can. Keep your stuff on. I'm just doing this really quickly, guys, as I'm doing the video. Also, once you have removed your caliper bolts, if you are changing out your rotors, not just your brake pads, I recommend doing rotors with pads, as I said. You're going to want to remove your caliper brackets too. That's your actual caliper bracket, and those on most Hondas, like I said, 98 to 2006, I believe actually, are going to run a 17 millimeter caliper bracket bolt, all including no washer, but slightly greased. I'm just kidding, guys. If you would ever grease your caliper brackets or your caliper bolts, we've got a problem. So you never want to do that. The only place you would ever add grease to on a braking system is by using synthetic caliper grease, or you can use stop squeak grease once the pads are already on it and you kind of spray it near it. But I recommend using synthetic caliper grease, and I recommend placing it at all contact points. Metal hit metal, except for pad on rotor, of course. But every place that metal hits metal, I would recommend placing the synthetic caliper grease. Alright, now that you've got your air tools and you've got your ratchets all set up and you've got your caliper brackets off, you're going to go ahead and pull your caliper off. You're going to go ahead and need to suspend it, as if this thing were to drop, you would have a ruined brake line. That would not be good. I also do not recommend bending it and keeping it kind of, you know, propped up like this, so to speak, as it is causing stress on the brake line there. So I do not recommend doing that. Alright guys, once you have your caliper bracket and caliper bolt off, next step would be to take the rotor itself off. Rotor is very simple. I'll put the new one back on here. However, there are two Phillips head screws that are located right here. Two Phillips head screws. I have coated them with braking paint. That is coated with braking paint as well. And I have also, at a previous time, probably about 7-8 years ago, painted my calipers red. When I was a kid, no point in doing so, all for aesthetic reasons. However, okay, we're moving away from our EBC cross-drilled dimpled rotors here, as you can see, and we're putting some brand new brake pads on. So I'm going to be using a turned rotor, but after removing your caliper Phillips head screws, you're just going to go ahead and pull them off. If you have a hard time getting them off, just as the wheels itself can be difficult coming off of the hub, releasing from this point, you're going to want to take a rubber mallet then and slap your rotors from the other side here. There's one point where the discs can actually touch onto the rotors right here. There's no clip, retaining bracket. So you're going to want to hit that from the other side, most likely, or this side, with a rubber mallet, making sure not to damage the rotor if you're going to ever use it again in the future. Alright guys, that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and put the rotor itself back on. I'm going to go ahead and put this all together for you, and then I can quickly show you doing the other side, but that's how to do and repair, replace your own disc brakes, calipers, rotors. Do the brakes on your car yourself, people. Save money and time. And learn how to do this, folks, okay? Alright guys, I've got my newer turned on a lathe rotor. It's not a brand new rotor. Keep in mind I recommend using a brand new rotor when you're using a new pair of pads, because pads can form and cause little indentations to the rotor that are specific to each rotor itself, and how they go around and how your ball joints are, you know, aligned and stuff and whatnot. So after this, the next step would be to put in our caliper screws. So you can see here, just going to go ahead and slightly turn those in, and it's difficult to do with one hand like this, so just going to put these caliper Phillips screws right back in where they came out. Okay guys, once you've made sure those are hand tightened with a decent #1 Phillips, mind you, not a ratcheting Phillips screwdriver, because that'll create problems. You just want to hand tighten those. I'm not sure the torque specifications, however, you are not going to, stupid garage, it's annoying. Alright, you are not going to want to use a torque wrench on any of this stuff, as there are no torque specifications. It's all pretty much hand tighten, or as tight as you can get it with an impact wrench without overpowering it. Using an impact gun or ratchet, in most cases, can overpower this stuff when turning it on. That's why I specifically recommend, and yes, I'm repairing this with a Certifit bumper today, so I'll do a video on pulling off the bumper as well. But I do recommend using impact guns and pneumatic guns only, specifically to take the things off. Putting them back on, I would hand tighten. Whatever tools you want to use, I specifically use the Mac tools to put the stuff back on, as the Mac hand tools are quite easy to use. Specifically, just the hand tools. Craftsman tools are nice and all that, but as I said before, I recommend using a breaker bar to get the difficult bolts off in some situations. I know I've taken a clear coat and coated this breaker bar, but yeah. Alright guys, next step is going to want to put your caliper brackets back on, and then go ahead and put your calipers on and your new pads on. I've got my newer pads here. They're carbon metallics. They're not semi-metallics like I'm running right now. I'm running Hawk pads on there currently. Hawk pads worked out great for the summer last year, and I ran them all the way through the winter here. So, worked out wonderfully. As you can see, those are wearing pretty evenly. Not down any squeakers, so the only reason we're having a tremendous squealing going on is, well, rotors and pads that aren't, meant to wear that far, probably. Okay, guys, so once you've chosen your new brake pads, you're going to go ahead and size them up, choose which one that they're usually going to be placed inside like this. So you're going to have one hub, the other hub, left wheel, right wheel. So I'm going to go ahead and choose out of their order. They should be exactly the same. Is you need to go ahead and make sure these are the exact fitment, the OE replaced brake pads we're looking for. And they are. You're going to go ahead and want to add some grease right here. As we said, any metal-to-metal contact besides pad on rotor, you're going to want to add grease to. Check out the brake pads for any braking, as I would not be concerned with any chips like that. But make sure to look at them prior to use, and then go ahead and install into the caliper bracket once you have that on, and then your caliper. Alright. Alrighty folks, once you got your caliper bracket on in, and you got your two 17mm caliper bracket bolts on in, go ahead and take your Mac Knuckle Saver Tools wrench and use your 17mm side. Make sure to use on specifically, although on this one it is a reversible solid state wrench, so we're just going to be using that side. But we're going to hand tighten these and make sure those are tight by hand, specifically not using the pneumatic impact wrench or ratchet at this point. So air tools are done. The only necessity for air tools after this, guys, would be specifically to put lug nuts back on. Make sure if you are using a Honda, you are using metric. 3/4 can be used in situations where you don't have. Alright guys, after you put your caliper brackets back on, put your pads in, then put your caliper on. After you have taken your, there's a piston in here, whether it be 4, 6, 2-piston calipers, whatever. You must compress that piston with a C-clamp prior to fitting pads in. If you do not compress that piston with a C-clamp, you will not be able to fit your pads in. Your brake pads will not fit. You'll be going, oh, are these too big? I don't understand. No, it's not that they're too big. It's just simply that they will not fit without compressing that piston in. I'm going to go ahead and walk around the car really quickly to show you what I'm doing. Get a good example idea. However, please be extremely cautious. Exercise extreme caution when doing this, and always please use a jack stand. Never do it like this. And when doing so, always, I've made a grave mistake in not removing the pole from my jack. Please do so, as if this were to get lifted up and moved down or twisted in any way, it could affect whoever's underneath it. So, alright guys. Go ahead and make sure your rear calipers and rotors are doing good while we're doing this. Otherwise, you might need to order some more. But rear brakes are probably needing to be changed, probably the 30% that the front brakes do. 30% braking probably in the rear, 70% braking in the front. Front brakes are going to be the ones we're going to want to replace more often. Alright guys, after you've done your caliper brackets, as I've said, and you've put your rotors on, put your rotor screws on in, you've done your caliper bracket with your 17mm caliper bolts, you've hand tightened those, make sure you're tighten. Before you put your caliper back on, put your pads on in, make sure they fit, grease them on up, C-clamp your piston, compress that, get it on in, fit your caliper over, bolt her back up with your 14 mils, and you are good to go. Put your wheel back on, jack it down, and do a short, small test in the driveway first with backing up braking. If you have not put that caliper bracket bolt in very tight, trust me, could be danger. You could be driving down the road and all of a sudden that caliper bracket come out, jam this caliper in the wheel well, and you've got a problem. So make sure that's safe and secure before moving on. Alright guys, we've got one of the pads in. Make sure you've got the correct pads by comparing to the older pads. Go ahead and place your caliper grease on the pad as such. Remember I said metal-to-metal contact, anywhere but pad on rotor. Alright, after you've done this, go ahead and continue and put your caliper on, making sure that it fits around the pads, and go to work. Alright guys, once you've got your brake pads on there, it was pretty easy. I could have shown you sliding them on in there, but they just slide on in there. After you do that, you just take your caliper. I had it hanging up, suspended like this. You're going to go ahead and just slip it on over like such. Just go ahead and slip it on over the pads after we've compressed it with the C-clamp, and connect it to this point right here. This point to this point. Slide your 14 mil bolts back in, hand tighten, and secure. Alright guys, I'm just going to do one tightening test. As I said, I recommend not doing anything with a air impact gun. However, I'm going to tighten one caliper bolt in the back here with the impact gun just to make sure we are tight. But finally, after doing so, I'm going to make sure I cap it off with a hand wrench to ensure that we are tight and safe and ready for street operation. Alright guys. Alright folks, last and not least, you're going to go ahead and make sure that after you've got your brake pads on, your rotors on, your caliper brackets on, and your calipers on, if you've so chosen to use a pneumatic device to tighten, well, you're on your own with that. However, I've used a pneumatic device without an impact socket on there, mind you. Not a good idea. Always use the damn impact sockets. However, once we've made sure, if we're in park, kind of give it a little wiggle like this to make sure that they move freely. If you hear any rubbing, you're going to have to do a little bit of driving to make sure that you wear those pads in on these rotors. However, with brand new pads, you're always going to get a little bit of rub. So, I recommend ensuring that everything is tight and good to go before you put this back together. Put your wheel on, lug nuts, tighten up. Finally, do your lug nuts 1, 2, 1, 2, and finally, jack down the vehicle, release her down, let her down, then finally do a tighten with pneumatic. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Finish it off again on the one you started. Alright guys, make sure everything is safe and sound before you get rolling back on the road again. And I thank you for watching Puppy's World. Please subscribe. I'll be back with more automotive stuff.